Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Lions Grid. We're back here today to be talking a little bit of Week 14 action, digging into the games this week. Of course, we've already had one game played on Thursday night, tossing up the picks from that game. You can see here we were split on the game. Joe going with the Cowboys, who I agree definitely needed the win more, and I went with the Chicago Bears here. So in the end up getting the W there for me going with the Bears. Kind of a surprise there. Really, I have to give credit to Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless over on Fox Sports, because they were really the two guys that talked me into going with that Chicago pick. I had sort of, I'd been picking Chicago earlier in the season, and it was biting me in the butt. So I had sort of sworn off him a little bit there, but hearing Skip Bayless talking about how he didn't have faith in his Dallas Cowboys was enough to sway me in this Thursday night matchup. So I did go with the Bears in that game. So starting off the week strong. Going to show you here, of course, for Pick'em, we do just the straight-up winners. We don't do the point margins and things like that, like if you were betting. We're just going straight-up pick the winner. And here is the record through Week 13. So this is not including Thursday night's game. On the, the left side of the screen, you have Joe's record at 108 and 84. So he's got 108 winners, 84 incorrect. I'm sitting at 115 and 77. So a 7-game lead there in terms of who's got more games correct. And of course, I added on to that with the Chicago pick. But this week we do differ on quite a few games. So there's certainly an opportunity for either Joe or myself, Joe to make up ground, or for me to extend the lead a little bit. So it's going to be a very exciting week. I think there's a lot of really good matchups this week anyways, so it should be a pretty spicy week of football. So without further ado, let's jump into it here and take a look at the rest of these matchups, because like I said, there's some really good games. We'll talk briefly about the Lions and Vikings matchup. Unfortunately for Lions fans, this season is a wash. It is what it is. Not going to the playoffs. It's just not happening. I don't think we're going to see Stafford again, but we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the game. But so we're unfortunately to have what it should be an entertaining show, we do have to focus more so broadly on the NFL because unfortunately what's going on with the Lions just isn't that exciting at this time. But it is what it is. But jumping into the first of today's 1 o'clock games, we have a pretty interesting matchup between the Colts and the Buccaneers. You can see Joe and me are split here on the picks. I think the Colts have been the better team on the season, and I usually have a pretty simple formula for picking winners. I go with who's the better team. However, the Colts are 6-6. Tampa Bay is 5-7. This game's being played in Tampa Bay. T.Y. Hilton still hurt for the Colts. Eric Ebron's now been placed on IR. Adam Vinatieri's out. The Colts are on a 2-game losing streak, I think, and the Buccaneers are on a 2-game winning streak or something like that. So it seems like these two teams are pulling in different directions. You look at Tampa Bay, Jameis Winston is having a particularly potent fantasy football season because he's thrown for a ton of yards and touchdowns. Yes, he does have interceptions, but he's also thrown for a ton of yards and a ton of touchdowns, which helps make up for that, at least from a fantasy perspective. Excuse me. So I like what Tampa Bay has done. Obviously, I don't think either of these two teams are going to be in the playoffs. The Colts had a chance there. The AFC South is kind of a 3-team race. You got Houston out in front, then you have the Titans, and then you had the Colts right there. But the Colts going on this little bit of a losing streak, it certainly has hurt their chances. So I don't think you'll see the Colts in there. There was a time, especially when they beat Houston a few weeks ago, where I thought Indianapolis would be the team representing the AFC South. But these last couple of games, I think, have certainly hurt their chances. Tampa Bay, I don't think, is a good team, but there's one of those teams where they're unpredictable. You don't really know what you're going to get out of them. They're a dangerous team, and in this battle between two teams that I don't think are going to make the playoffs, for my money, I'm going with the team that's more dangerous. I'm going with Tampa Bay. So the first game of the Sunday games, me and Joe differing, I'm going with again, Tampa Bay, Joe going with the Colts. The next game up here in the 1 o'clock slot, perhaps one of the best games of this weekend. You have an AFC matchup between the Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. Me and Joe are both in sync on this. We're both going with the Ravens. I think this is going to be a really good game. Even though we're both going with the Ravens, I would not be surprised if Buffalo gets a win here. Buffalo is a very good team. Really what swayed me into going with the Ravens over the Bills is the fact that, both of these two teams have, of course, the Bills have to play the Patriots twice, and they'll be playing them again upcoming. But they already both have played them once this season. The Bills played a close game at home against the Patriots, but they lost by like that much. The Ravens, on the other hand, played the Patriots, and they got the win. So that's sort of the measuring stick I'm using. I think they're both really good teams. And again, I think Buffalo can beat the Ravens because I like what they do on defense. I like how Josh Allen's playing. He's definitely doing a lot for that offense, and then they find ways to win the game. On the Ravens side of things, I like what Lamar Jackson's doing. The way they run the ball is impressive, and then they suck you in, bring everybody into the box, and then they do those deep throws down the field to Hollywood Brown. So it's a tough task, I think, and this should be a really good game. Obviously, unfortunately for the Bills, they play in the AFC East with the Patriots, who are more than likely to go ahead and wrap up that division. So they'll probably be a wild card team. But if I'm an AFC division champ, I don't want to be the team that has to play the Bills. Again, this should be a really good matchup in that 1 o'clock slot. Very interested to see who does come out on top. But again, me and Joe here, as you can see, both going with the Ravens in this matchup between these two playoff-bound teams. But it should be a pretty good game. Maybe the 1 o'clock slot has two very good games in it that should tell us a lot about the potential playoff power structure, because they are some good matchups. Taking a look at our next game, and we'll talk here about the Lions and the Vikings. Both me and Joe going with the Vikings. Of course, as you can see in the thumbnail of the video, David Blau getting the start for the Lions again. Matt Stafford was questionable for most of the week. They ended up ruling him out after Friday's practice, and they did more scans, and they could still see the fractures in his back. At this point in time, I'm really not sure why they don't shut him down. It may just be, Stafford's a pretty competitive guy. He's a guy who's known for playing through injuries and being out on the field, so maybe he doesn't want to be put down on IR. But it took them like a day to put Jeff Driscoll on IR when he got his injury, and here we're still sitting around with Stafford being, is he, won't he? Of course, the NFL also handed down some fines on the Lions, Bob Quinn, and Matt Patricia for the way they handled Matt Stafford on the injury report. That was week 10, I believe. Some big numbers there for ordinary people. I want to say the Lions got fined like $750,000, and then it was a couple $1,000s each for Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia. So that hurt a normal person's pocketbook, but of course it's the NFL, so there's plenty of money around. But it is what it is. This should be a pretty easy game for the Vikings to win. This is one I think both me and Joe feel really confident in going with the Vikings. If the Vikings somehow manage to lose this game, shame on them. The Vikings right now currently in second place at 8-4 in the NFC North. The Packers, of course, currently still are kings in the North at 9-3. But at the end of the day, the Vikings are either going to win the NFC North or they want to be one of two wildcard teams. You got to beat the easy teams, and an easy win on your plate should be hosting the Lions with David Blau as their quarterback. They've lost to a ton of teams. You should be able to get this win. So I would be really surprised if the Vikings drop this. Honestly, even if Matt Stafford played, just the way the seasons have gone for both these teams, I would be surprised if the Vikings lost. The Broncos did give him a scare a couple of weeks ago, so maybe David Blau and the Lions give him a scare here today. But I think by the time that clock says 0-0-0, your Vikings, or the Vikings, will have beaten the Detroit Lions. So it's pretty easy. Again, me and Joe here, both in agreement, going with the Vikings. Moving on to the next game, we have another one of our NFC North teams in action, the Packers hosting the Washington Redskins. Washington has been playing some good defense. They found a running game. Me and Joe, though, won't be... if you're a Packers fan, you got to watch out because I think this could be a little bit of a trap game. Don't disrespect them because you could lose, but as long as the Packers go there, take it seriously, come out sharp, me and Joe both agree, should be a Packers W. Again, that running attack for Washington has been really good in the previous couple of weeks here, so you got to watch out. Darius Geis, Adrian Peterson, both doing some good things on the ground, but should be an easy win for the Packers to improve to 10-4 and retain first place in the NFC North. A game they'll probably want to because, again, the Vikings are playing the Lions, which should be an easy win for them. So if the Vikings win and the Packers were somehow to lose, you'd have those two teams right there at the same record. Going to be a very spicy finish to the season if for some reason the Packers do drop a game to Washington. But me and Joe both agree should be a pretty easy win for the Packers at home against Washington. Next up, still in the 1 o'clock slot, we have an AFC matchup between the Broncos, who will be traveling to Houston to take on the Texans. Both me and Joe like the Texans in this one. Of course, the Texans are coming off that victory over the Patriots last week, so there could be a little bit of a hangover there because the Texans have struggled to get over that hump. However, the Broncos aren't having the greatest season. They do have Locke in now. He's off. He was on IR. He's back. He started last week. At the end of the day, having him in, is that really going to elevate them to the level where I think they can get a win against Houston? No, but he did come in. They got a win last week. You still got to watch out for Phillip Lindsay running the ball. Denver is very much a dangerous team. They prove that when they win up big on the Vikings, but on paper, a game the Texans should win. Of course, they like to make things interesting at times throughout the season and lose those games. But again, me and Joe going with Houston in this game. Taking a look at another very good matchup here in the 1 o'clock slot. It's an NFC matchup between two. It could be a preview of the NFC Championship game. Let's be real here. You got the 49ers traveling to New Orleans to play the Saints. Me and Joe are split on this game. Joe's going with the home team, the Saints. I really like what I've seen out of the 49ers. Their front seven is amazing. Their offense does a good job of scoring points. Greg Kittle's another week healthier. It's going to be a good game. Whoever loses this game, this is going to be a very good game. And like I said, could be a preview of what's to come later on in the playoffs. Very interested to see how it plays out. Two very good teams. I think obviously you have, with Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, they've been doing great. Their defense, the Saints defense, of course, has been playing, I think, above expectations. They've been doing that ever since Teddy Bridgewater had to be filling in for Drew Brees. But, it's going to be very good, a very good game, and I'm excited to see how it goes. But for my money, going to go with the 49ers in this one. Again, Joe going with this home team, the Saints. This next game was a game where this could be a trap game for them, and it could have been a trap game for me for Pick'em. You got the Bengals traveling to Cleveland to take on the Browns. That's an AFC North matchup. Me and Joe both going with the Browns. I had to remind myself that in Pick'em, especially when you're doing straight-up picks, you tend to go with the team that's been better on the season. The Browns haven't had a great season, but the Bengals have only gotten one win. Of course, that one win did come last week with Andy Dalton back at the helm, so maybe a little bit of momentum there. But, overall, this game does seem like it could be a bit of a powder keg. If Cleveland were to lose this game to the Bengals, it could cause them to explode, which was part of one of the things that caused me to want to think and go and make that Cincinnati pick. I gave way to one of my basic tenets of Pick'em, which again is go with the team that's been better on the season. So I'm going with the Browns, but don't be surprised if Cincinnati does win that game outright, because it wouldn't be surprising. But again, both me and Joe going with the Browns. Another divisional matchup is in the NFC South, and it is between the Carolina Panthers, who of course fired their coach Ron Rivera, and the Atlanta Falcons, who are playing to hopefully save their coach Dan Quinn. Don't know if it'll be enough to keep him around, but In this game, me and Joe are split. Joe's going with the Panthers. I'm going with the home team, the Falcons. Really, my logic, I don't like midseason coach firings. I don't think they bring a whole lot to the table. I don't think teams are going to start to play better because you fired their head coach that they've had for 13 weeks in the regular season. I don't see what value that's going to add to the team. And on the opposite end, it's a home game for the Falcons. They've cooled off a little bit after their bye week. They were off to sort of a hot start there where they look like the team that everyone thought they should be. And then they've sort of cooled down since then. But I looked for them to get back on track again. The Falcons, I think, are playing to try and save Dan Quinn, whereas the Panthers, they've just lost their captain. Ron Rivera is now gone. Maybe, I don't know what winning once he's been let go does for him, but maybe that motivates him. Hard to say, but I'm going with the Falcons here. Joe's going with the Panthers. Again, both of these teams probably not likely to make the NFC bracket of the playoffs, so, sort of for pride here. But, yeah, not a whole lot impacting the rest of the league inside of this particular game. Then there's an AFC East matchup between the Dolphins and the Jets. Me and Joe are also split on this. Joe's going with the home team, the Jets. Le'Veon Bell is out for the Jets in this game. With that in mind, which does hurt my fantasy football team, because even though he hasn't been putting up great numbers, he's been pretty consistent, both getting some decent yards on the ground and getting some, we have a PPR fantasy football league, so he's been getting a bunch of catches and some yards there. So he has been pretty consistent for me, scoring, double-digit points. Gonna hurt to not have him, and it also hurt my opinion of going with the Jets in this game. And of course, the Jets already lost to the Dolphins this season. I'm going with the Dolphins. Give me the Fins. I think, of course, helping out the Jets in this game is the fact that it's being played in New York, colder weather for that Florida team, but I'm going with the Dolphins in this one. Moving on to our 4 o'clock games. Starting us off, we have the Los Angeles Chargers traveling down to Florida, Jacksonville specifically, to take on the Jaguars. Gardner Minshew getting the start back for the Jaguars, and I think these are teams, let's face it, are both having disappointing seasons. I want to say, let's double check here, but I believe, the Chargers are on a 3-game losing streak, and the Jaguars are on a 4-game losing streak. Not a whole lot of momentum to be had for either of these two teams currently. However, Jacksonville has made the decision that they are going to go with Gardner Minshew as their starting QB this week. Maybe that gives them a little bit of a spark. It is the closest thing to optimism or hope that either of these two teams have, because, again, very disappointing seasons for two teams that I think people thought would be doing much better than they are, because they do have some talent on their roster. So I'm going to go with the Jags. Joe's going with Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. The good news for both of these teams is that one of them has a shot of breaking those long losing streaks. Unfortunately for the other team, it will continue on. But again, neither of these two teams, the Chargers there for a second look like they could maybe challenge for an AFC West title. I don't think they've been mathematically eliminated yet, but I think it's unlikely that the Chiefs or the Raiders drop enough games where the Chargers somehow catapult themselves into first place. But again, Joe going with the Chargers, me going with Jacksonville in this game. Next up, another very good matchup. Of course, it's a matchup that's lost it's going to be interesting. All right, it's a matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and the New England Patriots, and I went with the old adage of pick 'em, choose the New England Patriots, and more often than not, you will be right. The Patriots undefeated so far this season at home, but their offense these last couple of weeks has looked anemic. They did lose last week to Houston. It's very rare that the Patriots drop 2 games in a row. There's a lot of factors in there that make it look like choosing Kansas City would be the trap. I really did want to go with Kansas City in this game because I do think that Kansas City's defense, I think, is better than the Patriots' offense at this moment. Obviously, the stars of the two teams, the offense of Kansas City is the star of the team, and the defense of the Patriots is the star. But I think if you look at the other side of the coin, I think the Chiefs' defense they're bad, but I think they're better than how the Patriots offense, if that makes sense. So obviously their strong suits are the other side of the ball, but if you look at the other side of the coin, I think the Chiefs have the edge. Of course, special teams could come into play as well, and the Patriots do a very good job of preparing from a special team standpoint. They haven't had a kicker though here. They just brought on Nick Folk to come in and take over the kicking duties. So their kicking game could be a little shaky. There are reasons not to like the Patriots in this one, but at the end of the day, like I said, more often than not, especially when you're doing straight up pick 'em, when in doubt, choose the Patriots, and more often than not, you will be correct. So we're going with the Patriots, but certainly I think there's a chance the Chiefs come into Foxborough and get the win, but it's not an easy thing to do, and until they do it, it's hard for me to say that's what's going to happen. So again, me and Joe here both going with the Patriots. 4 games left, 2 more in the 4 o'clock time slot. You got the Titans traveling to Oakland to take on the Raiders. In this game, both me and Joe are split. Joe's going with the Raiders. I'm going with the Titans. Both of these teams they're on the fringe of the playoffs. The Raiders currently sitting at 6-6 in second place in the AFC West. They're on a 2-game losing streak, which is hurting them. They are 5-1 at home, though, so potentially could help them here in this matchup. The Titans are 7-5 and 1 game back from the 8-4 Texans, who lead the AFC South. The Titans, though, are on a 3-game winning streak. So if you just look at their streaks, these two teams are sort of on 2 different paths. The Titans are their stock's rising. Oakland's going down. I'm hoping that's going to continue here because, again, I'm going with the Titans. But again, Oakland is 5-1 at home, so Joe's pick of the Raiders could prove to be a good choice here, depending on how this game goes. Next up, the last of the 4 o'clock games, you have the Steelers traveling to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. Me and Joe split here once again. Joe is going with the home team, the Cardinals. I am going with the Steelers. I don't like the Steelers. Their offense hasn't looked very good, whether it's Duck Hodges back there or if it was Mason Rudolph. They just haven't looked very potent on that side of the ball. Minkah Fitzpatrick, though, in that defense, they're getting things done. And even though it isn't pretty on offense, the Steelers are 7-5. They're on a 2-game winning streak. They're finding ways to win games. You look at the Arizona Cardinals side of things, they're 3-8 and 1. They're on a 5-game losing streak. I think the Steelers get the win. They've been the better team again on the season. They find ways to win games. It isn't pretty, but they find ways to win games. I think the Steelers get the job done here in Arizona. But again, Joe going with the home team, the Cardinals. I like the Steelers because, you know what? It might not be pretty, but they're getting the job done. And that's really all that matters. Moving on to the Sunday night football game, which should be another good matchup. You have it's an NFC West divisional matchup as well. You have the Seattle Seahawks heading out to Los Angeles to take on the Rams. The Seahawks currently in first place in the NFC West at 10-2 on a 5-game winning streak. You got the Rams at 7-5, who are trying to keep pace with it's a group of 3 teams, 4 teams really, right? You got the Seahawks and the Niners in the West. One of those 2 teams will win the West. Then you have the Packers and the Vikings in the North. One of those teams will win the North. And then whichever team doesn't win the North, those 2 teams, whether it be the Seahawks or 49ers or the Packers and Vikings, those 2 teams are going to be the favorites, and the Rams are trying to catch them for the wild card spot. So it's a very important game for both of these teams. Obviously for the Seahawks, they want to keep pace. They want to stay in first place in the West. The Rams, they want to win because it gives them a win against one of the teams they're competing for a wild card spot for, and it helps them keep pace with the pack. So a lot going to be riding on the Sunday night matchup. Jadeveon Clowney and Ziggy Ansah, I know, are listed as questionable for the Seahawks. But me and Joe are both going with the Seahawks. Russell Wilson and the team have been rolling. The Rams, at 7-5, they haven't had an awful season, but they haven't consistently been playing at a high level. These 2 teams did play earlier in the season, and the Seahawks got the win. That game was in Seattle, though. This game will be in Los Angeles, but should be a pretty good matchup because the Rams, I think the Seahawks are more solidly a playoff team, but the Rams are a team that's right there on the fringe. So these are two playoff-ish teams, of course, that are also division rivals. Should be a pretty good matchup on Sunday Night Football this week. I'm excited to see how it plays out. That just leaves one more game for this week. You have an NFC East matchup on Monday Night Football, or the NFC Least, as they should be called, between the Giants and the Eagles. Both me and Joe going with the Eagles in this game. Daniel Jones has been ruled out, so Eli Manning will be getting the start for the Giants. The Giants are, I think, the only one of the NFC least teams that have officially been mathematically eliminated. They're on an 8-game losing streak. They're 2-10 on the season. They should lose. They've been bad. They should continue to be bad. The Eagles are on a 3-game losing streak, though. They're 5-7. But, the Cowboys have given the Eagles an opening in back-to-back weeks. The Eagles, if they're ever going to turn it around, the problem with Pick'em is you can't really go with who needs to win, because if you go with who needs to win, clearly the Eagles are the team. The Eagles have been better on the season, even though they've been awful. They just haven't been 2-10 awful. Going with the Eagles in this game. If they lose to Miami and the Giants in back-to-back weeks, stick a fork in them, they're done. I mean, that's bad. That's losing to two of the worst teams in the NFL in back-to-back weeks, when your main opponent has given you a chance to take over the division. Just like, I don't know. If I was an Eagles fan and that happened, I would be very upset, because it's sort of been handed to you on a golden platter, and then to lose to two of the worst teams in the leagues in back-to-back weeks would just be awful. So I don't want to see it. Could happen, but I don't think it will, going with the Eagles in this game. That is going to do it for today's episode. That ran through all 16 games this week. Of course, the Cowboys and the Bears have already played. But yeah, and as for the Lions game, as I said, the Vikings should get the win there. Unfortunately, it's not really exciting to talk about. Most of the intrigue is going to be surrounding the Lions about what happens in the offseason. Does Martha Ford give Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia another year at the helm? Does she bring in a new regime? So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait till the offseason until our Lions conversations get a little more exciting, because at this point, I'm not sure if the Lions have been. Let's double check here. Let's see. Teams eliminated from the playoffs. I'm not sure if they've officially been eliminated yet. Let's take a look here. Oh, they have been. They have been mathematically eliminated. So they will not be in the playoffs. They are one of 4 NFC teams with that case, 6 total. So, yeah, most interesting things to happen for the Lions will be in the offseason, so we'll hopefully be able to have some more things to talk about once we get closer to that. But, yeah, it should be, like I said, the 1 o'clock slot. You have the game is between the Ravens and the Bills, and the 49ers and the Saints. Should be some very good football here early on. So I highly recommend you check that out. If you did enjoy today's show, please do help the channel grow. Hitting the thumbs up button for the like and subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so are the 2 best ways to help support us. We do have a goal of reaching 100 subscribers to unlock a custom URL for the channel. Making some good progress there, but still need some help. So again, if you did enjoy the show, that's probably the best way you can help us out. Should be back again tomorrow, just doing a recap not only of the Lions-Vikings game, but maybe talk about some of the outcomes from today's games, because again, there are some really big matchups, those 2 that I mentioned in the early slot, and then of course you have the Seahawks and the Rams, you got Kansas City and the Patriots. Going to be a very interesting weekend of football, so we will be back tomorrow, and potentially joined by Joe to talk about some of those results. So until then, I'm Kevin Marheine. This has been the Lions Grid. We'll catch you during the next video. Bye-bye.